I love platformers. They're simple, they're fun, and they're creepy. Wowie zowie. 2D platformers are one of the first things that game devs will make, which is great for me because there ain't a lot going on in my brain. I'm a bit dumb. So I should be able to finally release a game on Steam. Welcome to Minima, my chill 2D platformer where the only thing to actually do is platforming, and getting to the top of the speedrunning leaderboards if you require constant external validation like myself. There's no overarching story or super complex puzzles, but to understand where this tale begins, we need to go back in time to the uneventful and definitely precedented times of 2021, where I made this super basic game for Blackthorn Prod's Game Jam. This can be thought of as Minima 1, but it was made in a week or something. It really wasn't anything special, though I thought it had the slightest bit of charm, the smallest chance of being made into something really cool with a lot more time and effort. Flick to later that year where I started making devlogs for Minima 2, with colour. This version looks so much better, but in reality it really wasn't very different. I made some new obstacles and added wall jumping, but despite playing around with the art style a lot, the game felt a bit too much like an unfinished demo, and that's because it kind of was. Whenever I saw a bug in my code, instead of doing the adult thing and squishing it, I just kind of ignored it, and over time those bugs built up and I felt super overwhelmed with everything. But in those days, I was but a youngling, not ready to tackle the horrors of the world. I couldn't drive, I wasn't able to cook, and I didn't know which one was Rhett and which one was Link. And none of that's changed now, but the point is, I hope I got better as a creator since then, so I wanted to give this project another go. Partway through 2023, I completely restarted the game from scratch, with better code, new and improved graphics, but more importantly, motivation and a plan to fulfill my vision for Minima. I don't know if it was just me desperately wanting to release an actual game on Steam or the fact that I got my first real PC, but here we are in 2024, our final year on this planet. The Minima Steam page is public, I've made over 100 levels so far, and development is going generally pretty well, despite finishing high school, moving to the city, and suddenly being placed in lecture halls learning about brains. I'm doing a neuroscience major. So, platforming. It's arguably the most important feature of a platformer game, and to start out with this is really simple. We take in inputs from the player to move left and right, and whatever direction this is, the player's X velocity snaps accordingly. If you hit the spacebar, then we add a vertical force, and these simple mechanics go a long way into creating a functional platformer. But in Minima, I want you to have complete control over where you can go, and only be limited by your skills rather than the game's mechanics. So if we have a situation where we need to get from here to there, there's not a lot we can do. Obviously, we can double jump which gets some height, but it's not like we can use explosives to get up super high. So let me introduce you to wall jumping. First, we check if the player's on the side of the wall. We basically shoot lasers out from the sides of the player, and if they overlap with anything, then we can slide the player down at a slower rate than falling. Then, if the player decides to jump, we can add a force in the upwards direction, but also in the direction away from the wall, so we kind of get a diagonal force which we can use to bounce off the wall for a super long leap or climb up the surface to pass a level. When I was designing these features, I was absolutely slaying my Year 12 physics classes, and I thought it would be really cool to actually draw some diagrams in my cat notebook.
That was good.
Not bad.
You can take a look at my thought process and judge me for how I name variables or whatever, but who knew that school could actually teach you stuff? That's hecking insane. Now, everything here works functionally well, but it does feel a bit robotic, even with the squishy animations. You see, whenever the player moves, its speed immediately snaps to a direction, which definitely isn't realistic, and since I'm going for hyper-realism in my project, I want this change to be just slightly more gradual. And to do that, we have to do some special physics moves and take a look at the world that we actually live in. In our environment, there are countless gas molecules moving about with their own mass and velocity, and they're about 300 picometers wide. So I wrote some simple code to simulate these in the game world. Then, as the player moves through these particles, Newton's third law of motion states that the gas molecules will exert a force of equal magnitude in the opposite direction, thus producing a drag force on the player as given by the drag formula. So if we use this equation for every frame for trillions and trillions of gas molecules that are colliding with the player, we can get realistic movement. No, I'm kidding, my computer would actually just explode. Also, look at this penguin. Instead, we can use this wonderful tool called DoTween to create an acceleration graph like this, kind of similar to the first Mario games, but a lot less slippy. This is really cool because I can actually change the acceleration and deceleration separately based if you're on the ground or in the air. It's really nothing too noticeable, but you do get slightly more control if you're on the ground, and your movement is a bit more floaty in the air in comparison, and even more so if you're leaping off of a wall. This is something I can change as I see fit, but I just thought it would be interesting to share. There's nothing as fun as maths, am I right, gamers? Yeah. But hey, that weird physics analogy from before still kind of works. See, this is the end portal which you're trying to jump into to finish the level. It's the equivalent of the Mario flagpole, or Super Meat Boy's girlfriend, or Mr. Key's room. Hi, hello. And instead of just swapping levels when touching it, I wanted the player to be drawn towards it, kind of like a gravitational pull. So I actually thought of going back to simulating every particle in the game, but after thinking for more than 1 second, there was a much simpler way to achieve this effect. We basically have a force on the player which gets stronger the closer it gets to the centre of the portal, which for all intents and purposes is a black hole. And this interestingly follows Newton's universal law of gravitation, which just goes to show that we can never escape the cold grasp of physics. Actually, this equation requires the masses of both objects and the gravitational constant, which is equal to 6.674. Alright, so we have some movement, and it all feels pretty epic, but a game ain't a game without the game. So let's take a look at some obstacles and level pieces. Right now, it's super empty, and we're just running and jumping in an empty void with no intrinsic goals. It's a wonderful reflection of society. Did you know that we live in one? So let me run you through the components that I've made. Please take notes because there will be a test. Spikes are simple. Triangles are very pointy. They can also make a wave because, yeah. Saw blades are also pointy, and they can go spinny spin. This was pretty easy to extend into a rotating arm kinda thing. I am in Spain without the A. Small saw blades can also jump up, just like potaboos, and I can control their height and how often they appear. Launcher, circle things, I don't know what to call them, but they're super fun to use and chain together, especially since they maintain momentum and you can just go zoom. These pair really well with bouncy pads. I especially like their little springy animation, which again I use do-tween to manipulate mathematically. Breakable hot potato floors, which can also act as semi-solid platforms, but also have the ability to keep the game fast-paced. On and off blocks to add some more timing and skill into the parkour and also to block your jumps. And finally some shooter turrets, because any game released nowadays just have to include some sort of FPS gameplay, and this is the best I could do. Now, it's time for the quiz. Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Icoco Quizathon. First, let's meet our contestants.
What's up everyone, my name is Malimor and Icoso has 15 people trapped in his basement that are yearning for sunlight.
Hi, yes, I'm Shelf and I'm both confused and tired.
Hello, yes, I am a human being person.
We sure do have a lineup of some epic gamers here tonight. I can't keep this voice up, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna speak like this anymore. I'm gonna show you a photo of a level element and you're going to write down the name of what it's called. Are y'all ready?
I'm gonna go with square, Icoso, yeah, I'm feeling good about square. Thumbs up emoji.
Oh, I'm sorry Mr. Moore, that is incorrect. Womp womp.
I'm gonna go with truncated icosahedron.
As much as I like your enthusiasm, Shelf, that is once again no bueno.
That is a spike. A triangle.
When making levels, I'm trying to mix and match these different components together to hopefully make some interesting and engaging levels. Now, that's kind of a lot of assets, but it's honestly pretty difficult to create all of these distinct set pieces and keep everything as minimalistic as I can. Because remember, this ain't Maxima, it's Minima, and that means I want to keep everything simple, but still exciting enough to make a fun game, if you know what I mean. And if you have any ideas for any other obstacles or level designs, let me know in the comments below or head over to the Icoco Discord. You can probably tell that I'm not the best artist, and I've taken a lot of inspiration from other games like Reiterate, 140, and even Minecraft. I've learned to be inspired by these projects though, because someone scrolling through Twitter or Steam can quickly understand what my game is about, rather than just clicking away. And now that I've built up my target audience, I can use silly little promotional quotes such as, if you love Celeste, you will like Minima. Or, are you a big fan of Hollow Knight? Well, you can become a windmill for Minima. Yeah, but the backgrounds are basically geometric shapes which have been blurred a bunch, and they move around a bit, and yeah, that's how I make the worlds. I've made some simple scripts for different movement patterns, mainly using waves and random offsets, but overall, I'm pretty happy with it. And on that note, here is the world select screen. Again, I'm trying to keep it real simple just by showing icons and your best time. I initially made these icons animated and, in a way, a mini world portal sort of thing, just like my favourite game of all time, Mario 64, but I found this to be a bit too distracting for a minimalist menu screen, and it also caused a lot of lag having all of the components running at the same time. There's definitely ways around it, but I just opted for a more basic, colourful sprite to illustrate which world it is. Now, I'm sure you've heard of the term juice when referring to game feel, and every game to ever game can be improved by copious amounts of juice. Mario Wonder is a fantastic example of this, with so many small details that you wouldn't really focus on otherwise, but still makes every action in the game, from running to jumping to elephanting to whatever, feel really good. For Minima, there obviously isn't as much I can do because I still need to maintain that minimalistic feel, but what I've done is squish the player for every action, which adds more impact and character when playing. Jumping and landing also have their own particle effects, which I'm still tweaking to make them seem at least a little bit more interesting, but most of my animations have actually gone into the UI, scaling and positioning to make every interaction reactive and just fun. Lukewarm opinion about juice. I don't like orange juice. I think it's a bit too goofy. Hashtag apple juice gang, where you at? We overthrowing the milk gang for real, for ill, zero caps, rant over. Each world in Minima has a 5-letter name. Don't ask why they're all 5 letters, I don't really know, but the way I came up with these names is kind of weird. A random word will just pop up in my mind and I'll think, this sounds bougie enough for a millennial to name their child. So, for my TED Talk, let's run through some examples. Vert, the French word for green, and everyone knows that I'm the king of Dance Dance French Revolution. Alpha, Delta, Gamma, and Omega, because Percy Jackson. Ember, I hardly even know her. Viol, it's almost like viola, but I'm not criminally insane, so I'm not going to include that heck of an instrument in my video game. Curio, it's a silly little word that I first saw playing Tears of the Kingdom. Ochre, fun fact, I came up with this name before the Ochre Froglights were announced. Yeah, I procrastinate on my work, could you tell? Deoxy, like of the ribonucleic acid variety, because I just loathe biology. It's the only science subject that I didn't take in high school and the only science subject I'm taking in uni. Fish, because I like the way it's spelt. And of course Azure, out of iconicity of the previous Minima versions. Thank you, and please talk to Ted on the way out. Also, I released an album, go listen to it. There are some things that I've worked on for Minima, but I'm not quite sure if they'll end up in the base game or not. First off, we have different difficulty modes for each world. When you beat the world for the first time, you've completed the Minima stage, which then you'll unlock Maxima and Extrema, which are increasingly harder versions of the same levels that you've just played, with more obstacles to dodge and more difficult jumps to make. It's kind of similar to the different speeds available in Mario Kart, except when I was workshopping this idea with myself, I found it kind of lazy and unintuitive, and so for a silly goofy player like yourself, it would probably take away from the gameplay experience. At this stage, each world had 10 levels, so with each of these 2 difficulties, it would create 30 total levels, but still only 10 unique ones. Instead, I upped this number to 20 levels per world, but with no difficulty settings, at least for now, which means I'm making 500 unique platforming challenges. But this does help me with another issue I was having, which was that you could finish a world in less than a minute, 50 seconds if you really tried. And for me, this was just too short. You'd keep going between the game and menu screens and then back to the game and more menu screens, so making each world 20 levels long extended this time and made the gameplay experience more immersive. There are also some game assets which I've designed and coded, but I haven't really found a place for them at the moment. Firstly, I did add functionality for entire moving blocks with wall sliding and wall jumping mechanics, inspired a lot by the opening stage of Celeste, just without as much momentum carryover. But without having Celeste's grab mechanic to stick to the side of a block, I still find these a bit strange to use in Minima. I don't think it matters too much either way if they're in the game or not, and the same thing goes for conveyor belts, which act as you think they would, the player is forced in whatever direction they go in. They're not that exciting though, which is why I'm a bit unsure about them at the moment, but I'm sure some Mario Maker levels could give me some inspiration. On that topic, I would love to eventually create a level editor for Minima, but that is far in the future of development, so fingers crossed. Finally, to help with the replayability of the game, I've thought about a monthly or even weekly contest for players to participate in. Basically, there'd be a new world or set of levels that you could play for a short amount of time before it's replaced with a new one. Then there'd be a temporary leaderboard where players can climb the ranks, and I know this isn't a totally original concept for games, but I still think it could be really fun and engaging, especially for you wonderful beings of the Icoso community, who are so beautiful and such epic gamers, and I love you. And yes, the leaderboards and minima are fully functional and compatible with Steamworks. A massive thank you to TheShelfman for sending over his code, because my brain was far too small to understand the documentation. The leaderboards are super easy to understand. Lower times are better, which puts you at a higher rank. Thankfully for me, I've maxed out my dexterity stats, so I'm at the top of the leaderboard for each world at the moment. But I hope this can make for some fun interactions between players, and most importantly, make everyone rage. This also gives me the opportunity for Minima to appear in a Summoning Salt video, which would be the greatest achievement of my pathetic life. Sorry that this video was pushed back about a week, but I really want to make this whole project just something that I can be proud of. Yeah, I may not understand what a quaternion is, and yes, I may not know how to tie my shoelaces, but I sure as darn hecking know I will finish this game.